Hello everyone, Happy New Year. So 2021 is already here. So what I like to do on this year, I want to start how to grow on orchids. And it is really kind of long process from growing an orchid. It's not really a simple task. It may be easy, it may not, but I have a lot of requests for how to grow orchids. So I thought about it, so then I'm gonna start just the basic. So it's gonna be a series of the videos and it's how-tos, and alongside with that, the story on orchids and what's involved and so forth. So we can give a different perspective and on looking at the orchids, and then you will have a different aspects of an orchid next time when you see an orchid. Okay, so basically the orchids is there are about 25 to 30,000 different species in the nature. So the orchids are from just about any part of the world except the North Pole and the South Pole. So there's just anywhere you go, there are some countries have a more you can see, some other countries are not that visible, but if you really look into it, there are orchids everywhere, one form or another. And on top of that, there are about over 250,000 hybrids. In other words, either naturally hybridized, but mostly the human being, the people are hybridize them. They cross between 2 or 3 different orchids. They cross them and then produce a different type or different color formation or growing conditions and so forth. So 250,000, that is quite a bit of an orchid that we can choose from. And just in case you haven't noticed that, as you can see, these are all the orchids that I have in the greenhouse. But if you're looking at the perspective of 250,000 or 25 to 30,000 species, and I've got over somewhere about 1,000 collections of it, I've got a long way to go. So once you get into it, it is very compulsive, very addictive, and it's just never ending. And then, I'm just have to warn you, okay? So once you start getting into it, even though, let's say for instance, Cattleya intermedia, and in their category there are different type of, and then I've got like a variety of Olata. When you look at my Facebook page, the profile picture is why my number one orchid in my collection is called the intermedia variety Olata. But even then, there are so many different shapes, different color variations, so forth. So then every time I see that, I start buying it and collecting it. So then I have several different type of same category. It looks a little different, but when you look at it, yeah, that is Olata, intermedia. Okay, so it is very, very intense and again, very addictive. Okay, so. And then on top of that, the how to grow an orchid is it's like understanding how it growing. It is very important. But just like any other thing, once you find the spot, a place that it does well, and then you understand what it takes to grow, what it takes for them to flourish, then rest is just coming easier. But understanding up to that point is the kind of key that really what it is that it takes to grow an orchid. So there are 3 things that I'm gonna start going over. That is like a light, temperature, and then the most of all, watering. If you master how to water them, you're done. Okay, but there are so many different stories, how to once a week. Some of them say put in pebbles on a dish, water dish, put it on top of it, Or the most common comments that I get is that using an ice cube. Um, so, and I mean it works, but again, I'm going to go over one by one, series by series, and how to grow so that way you can acquire when you acquire the orchids, and you can keep them alive for so many years, and then you can enjoy the blooming year after year after year after year. So what I'm saying is that these orchids actually they do not have a life expectancy. In other words, as long as you take care of them, they will grow and grow and grow. Okay, so that's the kind of encouraging, also discouraging. People saying, I don't have a green thumb, and as soon as I get them, they die. Or, but is it really? Or not understanding what it is they're doing, then may think it is that. Okay, so that's kind of a things that I wanted to embark on. Okay, so whole process purpose of this orchid, this video is about changing your perspective of how to grow orchids. When you look at the orchids, what are you looking at? How do you look at it, and how to take care of it? It's not just the bloom part of it, it's just everything. It's the whole entire plant. So as an example, I always use this illustration for whenever I explain about the orchid. That is that just a flower, is it the entirety? Or is that in other words, it's not the flower, it's just end part of it, that when it's bloomed and then it shows what it is, but the roots is the beginning. That without the roots, in other words, without the foundation, the plant is not going to grow. That with the roots and the leaf coming out, okay, and then with the leaf, and then when the time comes, and most people look at only the flower. We don't see the below, that what is going on. Okay, so next time we look at it, I usually look at the plants from the bottom up. When I look at the roots, how they look, and if they're doing really well, then the plant is going to do well. Like this one right here, or you can see these are all roots, okay, and like this one here, it's just the massive root system. As you can see, just the roots coming out of it like a crazy. Okay, so then blooming, it will come. Okay, now the orchids I divided them. They're divided into about 3 different type of orchids. Let's say type of how the growing condition. No, there are 3 different. If I can divide them into all the orchid categories, the 3 way. Say one is epiphytes, lithophytes, and terrestrial. So as you can see, terrestrial, that those orchids grow in a dirt. So in other words, it needs to be buried under the soil. It could be the sand or rocks where it is grown, and we have to simulate their condition, otherwise the orchid doesn't do well. Second one is called the lithophytes. As you can see, those are the ones grown on the rocks. So I guess it depends on the environment they were studying growing, and it was all rocks, meaning more than likely when the sun blazing down on the rock, it gets really hot and then gets cold. So without that simulation, and the orchids doesn't do well. The first one I mentioned, that epiphytes, probably about 70-80% of the orchids are mostly epiphytes, meaning they don't need to be in the pot. they are all air roots. As you can see, just they're growing this way. Now, this orchid, the fruit consists of two parts. One is in the core part is a root, and then outside is called the velamen. That's where it's like a sponge, like whenever the moisture is around, then they absorb it and then supply all the nutrient, the moisture, water in through the roots and up to the plant. So, in other words, they don't need to be in the pot. Okay, we human beings are thinking that we like to put everything in confined in a pot, but as you can see, they don't like it. They want to get out, get some fresh air, and so forth. So again, understanding that they need a fresh air, oxygen, and then water to be present of it, constant wet, dry, wet, dry. Okay, whenever it gets wet, and this velamen turning into like a greenish. Like these guys here, as you can see, it's called a mounting, and I mounted on it, and the roots grow on the bark, and then it grow. Okay, now I can see there's a spike coming out right now. Okay, so understanding of what it is they're doing and how they grow is very important. They will lead into how you water them. Okay, so hopefully as the time goes by, I'm going to give you examples one by one, and hopefully you understand that and apply it and make them grow well. Now, thirdly, we categorize most of the orchids are in about 3 different temperature range. It's called cool growing, and warm growing, intermediate, in between, and warm growing. As you can see, depending on even the same greenhouse, at the lower part is a little cooler, and upper part is warmer. So depending on what their temperature range is, then I will place them to where it need to be. So then it will help them to keep that in temperature range. So as you can see, there are hundreds of thousands of different orchids. Okay, so temperature range from one extreme to the other. Some of them need to be hot all the time. Some of them need to be cool all the time. So whenever I acquire new orchids, and then I ask the seller, what is the culture? What is the condition? Then it will tell me, oh, it's a cool growing, or it's an intermediate. And then some of them is deciduous, meaning during the winter time, you had to be no water whatsoever, because where it came from, there was no rain. As an example, in some parts of Mexico, there's no rain. So then any orchid came from in their region, then in the winter time, like a November through like a January, usually like a Halloween through Valentine's Day, then we hold off the water. And some of them gets just a little bit, but most of them just put it, all the leaves drop, it looks like dead. But as the spring come around, they shoot out the new growth and then flowering. So one other part of the learning, growing an orchid is learning each orchid's culture. So nowadays the information is everywhere in Google. You can put the name in it, and then it comes up, and where it's from, what's the elevation, what's the culture, and then what is a flower even look like. Okay, so it's again, it helps. There's a lot of information out there, but it is up to you whether acquire that information and then apply it and make them orchids grow.